Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this plenary session 3B. My name is Farsim. I'm the National Outreach Coordinator for Bangladesh. It's been a very challenging time here in communicating astronomy for the public conference, having people from all sorts of time zones. And please be patient and be kind and be apologetic for us because it's all voluntarily run stuff. So please be kind and be patient with us because there will be a few mistakes. So this session starts with a mistake. It's actually a technical fault, and we will have a slight adjustments because the plenary session, plenary talk 10 by Evgeniia Skaredneva on the development of astronomy outreach projects by forming an amateur astronomers community around the planetarium. She's from Irkutsk Planetarium, Russia. So her talk will have to be played now by a pre-recorded video, and that will be 20 some minutes video. And after that, we will have Professor Prajval Shastri, who was the scheduled speaker for today, for this session. And after the question and answer session, the following participants session will be 15 minutes delayed because we have to move slightly things. And this session will end at 6:30 UTC, and the participants session will start at 6:30 UTC. So thank you for us, and please post your questions in the Q&A stub, and not in the chat. And in the chat, you discuss with other stuff. And also, please feel free to fill up the evaluation form for the CAP 2021. And with that, I ask Pamela to start the video of Evgeniia Skaredneva. No sound.
Oh. Hi, colleagues. I am happy to say good morning from Irkutsk, Siberia, Russia. It's a great pleasure for me to be there. I wish I was there online, but sorry for some technical issues. I do the pre-recorded video. Anyway, thanks to all the colleagues who give us the opportunity to discuss different issues, different topics on communicating astronomy to the public and share our experience. Let me introduce myself. My name is Evgeniia Skaredneva. I'm a press officer of a private-owned planetarium in Irkutsk and one of co-founders of Irkutsk Regional Astronomical Organization. The topic of my presentation is development of astronomy outreach projects by forming an amateur astronomers community around the planetarium. So I should start with some history, because the new Irkutsk Planetarium was opened in 2015 in the city of Irkutsk, that has a population about 620,000 people. And I should say that we used to have a planetarium in Irkutsk before. It was a state-owned one. It was opened in the building of the church in 1950. It was a common practice for Soviet Union to place a planetarium in the building of church that were not used by the churches themselves. So the old planetarium, as we say, was closed in 1986, and then only in 2015 the new private-owned planetarium was opened in Irkutsk. It was the first private-owned planetarium in Russia. It hosts also a museum kind of place where we can show the different exhibitions. And also we host a city public astronomical observatory with a special telescope, refracting telescope, 170 millimeters in diameter. It was by amateur astronomers, especially for our facility, and we use it to show to the people the objects that we can observe in the city. We have a strong light pollution, so we can observe only the sun in the daytime, and we can observe the moon and the bright planets in the evening. Because we are a private-owned facility, it's not an easy task to run such a business in Russia. We have an imported equipment, so we are faced with problems due high operational costs and low exchange rates of Russian ruble, because we use the equipment that produced in another countries, and we need to buy some details for it. But still, we are doing our best to show the big universe in which we live to as many people as we can. And a way to address the challenges that we faced is to unite human and financial resources by forming a community of people who are eager to promote public outreach projects in the field of astronomy. And we already have 2 projects that have helped to reach this goal. First, it's a regular deep sky observation sessions outside the city. We started them in August 2015 by the Irkutsk Planetarium. The people who already had telescopes and were interested in astronomy became permanent participants of this activity, of these sessions. And the planetarium gave them opportunities to come to know each other and share their experience. And they formed an informal community, so-called Friends of the Planetarium. And the second project, it's International Sidewalk Astronomy Night. It's the outreach movement. It started by John Dobson in 2007. And Irkutsk was the first city in Russia to participate in this activity in 2007. And since then, International Sidewalk Astronomy Night was held in Irkutsk on an annual basis. So every year we conducted such an event for as many people as we can. And Irkutsk Planetarium became the main organizer of this event in Irkutsk in 2015. And in next 2 years, it provided free public observations at 6 locations in the city. In 2018, this event took place not only in Irkutsk, but also in 4 other cities, thanks to involvement of the Friends of the Planetarium, as I said before. These people with their own telescopes joined the event to show the celestial objects to the general public. So 15 locations in 5 cities and 35 telescopes attract about 4,000 people. And in the 2019, the event involved even 24 locations in 12 cities and villages. And there were 53 telescopes and about as many visitors as before. Last year, International Sidewalk Astronomy Night was organized online due to COVID-19 restrictions, and we did the live streaming of the observation of the moon. One of our colleagues streamed the picture from his telescope that he placed on his backyard, and another one commented on the pictures and answered the question that people wrote to chat on YouTube. The streaming gathered about 3,000 users from all the Irkutsk region and other cities in Russia too, and we used the YouTube channel of the regional newspaper. So it was a kind of collaboration with media. In 2021, we have conducted this event, International Sidewalk Astronomy Night, both offline and online, because in this year we can conduct some offline activities with some restrictions, but still we can do it. And just an year ago, due to pandemic, all the events with the public, they were cancelled because of restrictions. Moreover, since 2017, the Irkutsk Planetarium and its friends have organized the events of another international event, International Observe the Moon Night, in our region. In 2020, the last year, it also was held only online because of COVID-19. And in August 2019, a non-profit, non-governmental organization, Irkutsk Regional Astronomical Organization, was established. And there were 11 people. 2 of them are planetarium staff, and myself, I am one of these co-founders. So these 11 people became its founding members, became co-founders of this organization. IAU, Irkutsk Regional Astronomical Organization, unites amateur astronomers from different cities and villages of our region, and this organization started with an outreach project, Telescopes for Siberian Villages. Telescopes for All. Funds for this project were successfully raised with a crowdfunding campaign. We have a crowdfunding platform in Russia called Planetarium. So with this platform, we gathered the money for buying 5 telescopes to distribute them to small villages and cities of our region in order to promote astronomy to the public. We distributed these telescopes to people who are eager to promote astronomy, who are eager to organize a public event for children and start an amateur astronomers club, for example. We gathered 150,000 Russian rubles for these 5 telescopes. It were 6-inch reflecting telescopes, Newtonian on Dobsonian mount, and one of the people, one man, gave us another big sum, so we could buy not 5 but 10 telescopes. So we implement this project, and the succeeding project Telescopes for Siberian Villages was funded in 2020. by the International Astronomical Union's Office of Astronomy for Development. And thus we have 15 telescopes. 7 telescopes have already been distributed to the newly formed groups of amateur astronomers and remote villages and small cities. And 8 more was planned to be distributed in last year, but the pandemic restrictions have stopped the process of distributing the telescopes, but not the process of using the telescopes, of course, that have been already distributed. In the August and September last year, we gave telescopes to 2 more villages, so now we distributed 9 telescopes and we have 6 telescopes left, so we now we are working on looking for such people in different villages and small cities to give them the telescopes we have left. And all the people from these 9 cities and villages that already have the telescope, they already conduct the observation during the International Sidewalk Astronomy Night this year, and we are happy with this. We see that there's a lot of interest in small villages, interest of children and from adults too, to join these events, to observe the celestial objects. So we will work on this project. And Irkutsk Regional Astronomical Organization conducted the observation of partial solar eclipse on June 21st last year, and this event was held online on YouTube channel of the regional newspaper. As I mentioned before, it is Oblastnaya newspaper, and this event gathered about 50,000 viewers from all the continents, including Antarctica. Later this year, our organization started our own YouTube channel, and for example, streaming from observations of Gemini's meteor shower gathered more than 3,000 viewers, and observations of Saturn and Jupiter conjunction in last December, had gathered more than 14,000 viewers. Thus, we have a strong win-win collaboration of private company, that means Irkutsk Planetarium, a non-profit organization, Irkutsk Regional Astronomical Organization, media, of course, and the local communities, because our projects of telescopes for all and telescopes for Siberian villages, their aim is to develop the local communities by promoting astronomy to the public, by outreach events. We are strongly we think that if every person on this planet will have a chance to look through the telescope, his or her life became better. He or she can better understand the big universe that we live in. So thank you for your attention. I'm very happy to be with you there, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer it. Bye.
Thank you, Evgeniia. Thank you for your nice video that you quickly made for us, and thank you everyone for the patience that you showed and being with us. Can we have Professor Shastri with us? Professor Prajval Shastri, can you join us now here on the stage?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll share my screen now.
Okay. So it is our pleasure to introduce Professor Prajval Shastri, who was supposed to speak 20 minutes back, but she's now with us again. So let me introduce her to you. Professor Prajval Shastri is a seasoned astrophysicist, and she has more than 3 decades of research career with her. And her stellar career, within her stellar career, she was with many universities and centers that were very well known, globally known, and she has been with the Indian Institute of Astrophysics for 23 years. Currently, she is with the International Center for Radio Astronomy Research in Australia, and her talk today, the keynote speech, the title is Our Obligations While Crafting Our Science Communication Practice, Lessons from Investigating Gender Inequity. So it is also a pleasure for me, an honor, to host Professor Shastri. She's very active in social media as well, and I'm connected to her through Facebook, and I have seen her activities, and I learn a lot from her nice educative posts that she usually posts on the Facebook. So Professor Prajval Shastri, so the stage is yours. Oh, and sorry, don't forget to post question and answer in the Q&A stuff, and we'll have a 10 minutes quick Q&A session with Professor Shastri and Evgeniia if she's available there. Evgeniia. Thank you, Professor Shastri. Please.
Thank you. So many thanks for this opportunity, which is my privilege. And I'm also mindful of my privilege to be able to be well and give this talk amidst the dark times that we are going through where I am. So I speak to you as an astrophysicist and science communicator, and I hope to speak to both astrophysicists and SciCommers in this conference. And I presume that there are also several who identify as hybrids, like me. But before getting into my arguments, I want to pay tribute to one fantastic such hybrid who was also an institutional leader, Dr. Ratnashri Nandiwada, who was the director of the Jawaharlal Nehru Planetarium in Delhi. And we are all still reeling under the shock of losing her to COVID-19. So Ratnashri was a stellar evolution and neutron star physicist. This is her at the Arecibo Observatory during her postdoc with Joanna Rankin. She was director for 21 years, making the planetarium a city icon and the forerunner of all planetaria in India. And she was the leader and foot soldier combined. She was mentor to generations of young minds and truly a colossus. It's a huge loss to India and to this global community. So astronomy is now acknowledged as a powerful vehicle towards a better and more equitable world. And the Office of the Astronomy for Development, the IAU, has played a radical role in this, in connecting the dots, and has been pivotal in demonstrating the concept as well. Here are some vignettes from similar activities in India. Here is, Farsim, can you see my cursor? I forgot to check that.
Cursor, yes, I can check your cursor, yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is a astronomy skywatch program for a bunch of children who are dropouts from a slum school, and the impact on them was just electric. The little girl who's has a right to the eyepiece told me later that she wanted to be a scientist. This is an event for daily wagers that we held a dialogue on astronomy on the occasion of March for Science. And clearly, the little girl has become aware of something bigger than herself, a sliver of feeling perhaps of a bigger common humanity. So at the core of all of this is the tenet that the sky is a universal laboratory and astronomy must be accessible to all. But does astrophysics practice on the ground square with this vision? I will pick the example of the gender dimension and the simplistic gender binary evidence in the context of Indian physics to ask this question. I would like to ask what the evidence tells us and what does that mean for our obligations as astrophysicists and as astrophysics communicators. So why is there a gender gap in physics? These are some of the ideas, typical ideas put forward. That is it a lack of interest in science among girls? Some say it's systematically low innate competence among women. Some say it's because girls are socialized to feel incompetent in science. Some say it's discriminatory familial responsibilities on women. And there is also the not so popular hypothesis that there is discrimination within the profession. So in the Indian context, what does the evidence show? So looking at the first thing, lack of interest in science among girls. I just want to remind ourselves that gender is socially constructed, which means that it's something that does not exist in nature, but is invented by society. And we all act as if it exists, and by our tacit agreement, it does. So some gender-related social constructs are, for example, women don't drive buses, at least in India. Women don't play the nadaswaram, which is like a clarinet-like instrument in Indian classical music, or men should not wear saris or skirts. So here is a photograph from that same March for Science event, and this is Mamata, and she's a bus driver. This is Kalishabi Mehboob. She's a renowned nadaswaram player of Indian classical music. And these are the two men in yellow are dancers from the Baiga people in central India, and they're wearing skirts. So back to the hypothesis. So what is the evidence that there is a lack of interest in science among girls? So this is a survey done among high school students of 4 high schools in Dehradun in northern India. And at least 30% of the girls said that they like science subjects. So I will use blue for the feminine and red for the masculine. These are data from the Inspire Fellowships in India, which are a national prestigious fellowship by the government of India for students to study undergraduate and postgraduate science through a national competition. And clearly many girls study for it and try for it, and over 50% girls win the science competition and 50% win the scholarship for physics. Similarly, the Indian Academy Summer Fellowships also show that more girls than boys win the fellowships, apply for the fellowships and win the fellowships. So it's clearly not a lack of interest in science among girls. What about systematic innate competence deficit in women? Most people wouldn't say this nowadays, although we don't know how many think it, but there's also data. So there is this survey of physical scientists by Kumar in 2001, which showed no productivity deficit among the women scientists. A survey by Subramaniam in 2014 showed no competence deficit among women scientists. So it's not that. So then are girls socialized to feel incompetent in science? The same survey of high schools in Dehradun looked at the perception among the students that fewer girls than boys are interested in higher studies in science and maths. And the answer showed that more boys than girls said no. Yeah, more boys than girls said yes. more girls than boys said no, and more boys than girls said don't know. And then they looked at the perceptions about girls are not good at science and maths. Science and maths is difficult and girls go for easier subjects. And even there, more boys than girls felt so. So what they found was not a lack of interest in science among girls, but instead they found a male stereotype of science. So more boys than girls thought that science is a male domain, that girls found science difficult, and so forth. But they also found that more than 50% of the boys and more than 25% of the girls had not yet formed an opinion. And the task of the science comma is clear here, and I'll get into that later. But the evidence does not show so strongly that girls are socialized to feel incompetence. It shows more that boys are socialized to think that girls are bad at science. So what about discriminatory familial responsibilities? So here are data from the Global Survey of Physicists from 2014. And what it showed is more men than women reported being in a long-term relationship or being a parent or guardian, but more women than men reported that careers changed their personal decisions. So this suggests that indeed discriminatory familial responsibilities could be a factor in affecting the gender gap. But the gender gap in physics is much higher than the gender gap in biology, for example. So then discriminatory familial responsibilities cannot be the whole story. So what about discrimination in the profession? Again, back to the study by Neelam Kumar, who found women are systematically lower in the science hierarchy, despite there being no productivity deficit among women. And the mean age of women who were professors or equivalent was significantly higher than that for men. So there is definitely discrimination in the profession. These are data that we published in the EQUIP conferences, the IUPAP International Conference of Women in Physics. And the top diagram shows the fraction of women physics PhDs employed in higher education in India, which is itself below 50%. But without getting into the why of that, if we look then at the percentage of women physicists among the Academy Fellows, or the prestigious Raman Memorial Lectures, or physics institution governing councils, the fraction drops to single digits. So clearly, there is a gender discrimination mechanism operating within the profession. Now, another case in point, which is particularly relevant for science communication, is the example of a monthly science magazine called Resonance, which is published in India by the Indian Academy of Sciences. And the target audience are sort of undergraduate level science students and adult science buffs. The March 2017 issue was a special edition that myself and a colleague of mine guest edited to have an all-women authorship. So in this context, we looked at the data for this magazine. Now remember that the fraction of women science PhDs employed in higher education is 45%. So that is a pool from which one would expect that one would draw authors, apart from the bigger pool of non-science PhDs, say, or science buffs who are not PhDs and so on. So this is looking at the first authors, and the fraction of women has dropped from this pool to under 15%. The same or very similar numbers are true for all authors. So in 2017, we did the special issue. And so that was an all-woman authorship for first authors. But you can see that after March 2017, which was the occasion of Women's Day, it was back to business as usual for the rest of the year. So obviously, the editorial board didn't get our message that it was very easy to find competent women authors to write for this magazine called Resonance. 2018, it was a similar story. Again, in March, to commemorate Women's Day, the editorial board decided to produce one more issue with an all-women authorship, edited by women authors. But then it went back to business as usual, with the exception of this issue and this issue. So I highlighted the guest editors at the time of those two issues, but otherwise it was back to business as usual. So clearly there is discrimination within the profession. This was one more example of that, when scientists are invited to write for a science magazine, people are thinking mostly men scientists. These are the C.V. Raman lectures, which I said had only 3% women until 2015, but the intervention by the Gender and Physics Working Group, which was launched in 2017, made a difference, and the fraction rocketed to 30% and has stayed that way. However, band-aiding does not work always. Unless the systemic problem is acknowledged, change will be too slow and at too high a cost. So we need to note that the government of India recognized the gender gap in the Indian science profession a long time ago. In 2008 itself, the then Minister for Science and Technology said, "It seems to me that we have developed in science and technology a stratified system in which men are favored with career advancements at the expense of women." However, even though the government put in a lot of funding into addressing this gender gap, among Indian scientists, only now there is acknowledgement, but there is acknowledgement that gender disparity exists. There is not an acknowledgement that the root cause is gender discrimination. And therefore, when they fund interventions in order to address the gender gap, like this scheme of the Department of Science and Technology, which is meant to help two scientists who are a couple to find jobs in the same place, the whole framework is rooted in patriarchy. So the scheme is open only to women. The women are supposed to leave their jobs and go to a different place to follow their husband, because, as it says here, they have the responsibility of attending to ailing parents, accompanying children, etc., etc. Furthermore, all of us, regardless of our gender, are brought up to accept sexist thought and sexist action. And in fact, the John Jennifer resume study of Ross McCusin in 2012 found that science faculty's subtle gender bias favors male students, but both female and male faculty were equally likely to exhibit the bias against women. So it is then only natural that all of us are prone to be discriminatory along other dimensions as well. For example, casteism, racism, and ableism. So this is why I emphasized at the beginning that I'm using gender only as an example of discrimination and trying to look at the evidence, but because it is also easy, relatively easy to find evidence in the simplistic gender binary framework. So what does all of this mean for science communicators? Recall our core tenet. The sky is a universal laboratory, so astronomy must be accessible to all. But clearly, astronomy is currently not accessible to all. So it is our responsibility then that we must project astrophysics as something that can be done by all, and we must make the enterprise welcoming to all. So these goals need to frame every science communication effort. In other words, we need to mainstream these goals into designing whatever programs we are designing in science communication. So I will illustrate that by a few examples. So for example, the school student survey that I talked about, and also the data from the national prestigious fellowships that students get to study science, that there is no evidence that girls are uninterested in science. In fact, it's the opposite. So then, mentoring of girls is not the need of the hour. What we need to do is mentor all young minds, because all young minds must learn that people of all genders can competently do science. Another example, the same science magazine example, Resonance. The author list must not show then gender disparity, because that way we're projecting science as an enterprise which is only preferentially done by people of some genders. So the author list must be diverse on all dimensions of possible discriminatory practice, whether it's gender or caste or sexuality or race or ableism. Another example, for example, if we were to design a mentoring program within a science institution, we must ask the question, are the participants who we select coming from all backgrounds of the pool represented? And if not, why not? Also, and this is perhaps more important, have scientist mentors undergone bias training? Because if not bias trained, the mentors are likely to be prone to unconscious bias when mentoring the participants of the program, which could in fact defeat the purpose of the program. Another example is, for example, a registration for a conference and asking for gender information. So if you ask, instead of just a bland question saying gender and say 2 boxes or even 3 boxes, if you ask instead, what gender do you identify with? And have these options, for example. This is not something frozen in stone, but just as an example, it might be a small step towards making the conference more welcoming to all genders. Facilities within an institution or an outreach event site. So for example, we should ask the question, are there unisex toilets? Having unisex toilets, or better still, all toilets unisex, makes it welcoming to all genders. It projects an image of being welcoming to all genders, and it also makes it welcoming for people with disabilities. And so this is the other thing about addressing discrimination dimension, that if it is addressed as a root cause, then it results in consequences which makes it nice for everybody. Organizing an outreach event. So again, are the participants from all backgrounds of the pool represented? And if not, why not? Are the speakers / communicators representative of the diverse backgrounds involved? Or even better, underrepresented groups should be overrepresented among the speakers and resource persons and mentors. In summary, even the evidence that is disaggregated using just the at best simplistic gender binary data shows that social biases are strongly reflected in astrophysics practice. So I emphasize this idea of simplistic gender binary data because obviously the gender binary framework is not the ideal framework. One should look at a non-binary framework, but when one is looking for evidence, it is easiest to find evidence in the gender binary framework, and that can be interpreted, lessons can be drawn, and this is the reason I did that. But that was not to endorse the gender binary framework. Therefore, astrophysics is not objective. It's not an objective discipline that it claims to be, and is not, at least as yet, welcoming of all people. And therefore, striving to project that astrophysics can be done by all is an imperative, and science communicators have a major role in that, but scientists do as well. Awareness of the multiple dimensions of discrimination is an imperative, because as I emphasized, I was only using gender as an example. And not as an all-consuming dimension of discrimination. Striving to make astrophysics practice welcoming for all is also an imperative. And therefore, the science communicator needs to be an equity champion and a critical insider. By that, I mean that those of us who straddle both research and science communication need to be critical insiders within our institution and push our institutions to do the above. Namely, to project that astrophysics can be done by all, to be reflective on the multiple dimensions of discrimination, look for data for both within their institution and outside as to what the degree of discrimination is. And of course, striving to make astrophysics practice welcoming for all. So social biases, as I said, is strongly reflected in our practice, and that is the basic message that I want to convey. So I think I will stop there and I'll take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Shastri. That was a very illuminating talk. We have 14 minutes left of this session to go through the question. We have quite a few questions for you and some comments from the audience. Some of our colleagues want to have your PowerPoint slides, if it is possible. And I like to share just one personal experience that from Bangladesh. We actually arranged a all-girls astronomy workshop this past February. So the participants are it's probably 26 girls from different secondary school level from across the country. The facilitators were all female astronomers that we could gather up. Dr. Sultana Nahar was there, Dr. Lamia from Canada, and others, all girls astronomers, including the facilitators. That's one thing. And number two is in Bangladesh, in the secondary school, the girls turn up is more than boys. It's overall education, not science, but this is a very big turnaround for Bangladesh. The number is is very large actually compared to India or China. This is still low, but 51% girls in the secondary schools, and we have 88,000 schools in Bangladesh, not small numbers. So this is a big turnaround. I would like to.
Can I just respond to you something that you said first before we go to the question?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think the data you just mentioned, I would argue that it supports my point. So you already have more girls than boys in science. So clearly girls are interested in science. So then when you have your workshops, I think it was great that your facilitators were all women, because everybody needs to see that it is ordinary. It's quite ordinary and regular for women to do science. It's nothing special or amazing or anything like that. But the participants, I would ask, why are you restricting the participants to only girls? The girls are already interested in science, so they're coming anyway. Why do you want to exclude the boys?
That was the girls' week.
Boys, yeah, okay. Because the boys also need to
we did that.
be mentored by women resource persons and women scientists. Yeah.
I like to respond. That was the girls' STEM week.
Okay.
In February we had the girls' STEM week. That was part number one, and number two is that we have found out in our Olympiads, in Science Olympiad and in Math Olympiad, Physics Olympiad, girls' participation is very low. So we wanted to have a all-girls camp. We actually do all-girls camp for example, International Junior Science Olympiad from Bangladesh, in order to have more participation. So that's number two to your answer. So I'd like to read out to you two comments from our colleagues. Anna Arnadottir, she commented that I have been working at physics astronomy research institutes for decades, and I see this inequality in action, especially how women are faced with the choice of family or career, and how very few manage both. And our moderator here, Pamela Gay, she also commented that I have started asking people to write their pronouns and I don't give options. I did this because I was afraid I would miss options, but many people have said they appreciate the freedom to write their option. So now I go on to the question and answer session. So let's see, we have quite a few questions for you. Suresh Bhattarai from Nepal, our friend, he has asked, how do you see the role of our cultural and traditional setup influencing girls' low participation in higher education and career in STEAM?
Yeah, so that I think is very regional specific and culture specific as well. In India, I would say that universalization of education does play a big role. So the availability of government schools and so on does play a big role. However, and it has played a big role, shall we say. Also, there are schemes such as, for example, midday meals in schools, which then draw students to the school, and also play a big role in decreasing or mitigating malnourishment to some extent. This has, of course, been hugely impacted due to the pandemic, and that's a huge problem now, but at least that was the system pre-pandemic. But yes, there are still cultural influences which then negatively impact girls. So for example, during the pandemic, many schools decided to move online, and that has had a huge impact, because in a family, if there is not access to more than one cell phone, then it tends to be the boys who get access to the phone and not the girls. So that's very strongly cultural effects playing out very strongly. But there is also the other side to it, which is that, for example, even though government schools have played a major role in bringing elementary education to a much larger swath of people, in the government schools, often it's a very patriarchal setup. So in a lot of government schools, for example, there is segregation of boys and girls within the classroom, in the classroom seating. Which is something they are just imposing. And in fact, this plays a very negative role, because in a lot of indigenous communities in India, Adivasis we call them, who are usually dwellers in remote areas, in forest areas, when there is a government school that is built there, their cultural norms, which are not so heavily gender segregated, are then trespassed on by these government schools, and then the children start to be sitting segregatedly in the schools, and then they take that back to their culture. So there are a lot of complicated factors that are playing out here, and it is, I think, very important for us to reflect upon it deliberately and be mindful and design our interventions that way.
Thank you. There's quite a few questions, and audience, you can also vote the questions by putting a thumbs up there, which question you like most, so that we can decide. Mamta Pommier from France, our colleague, she says that very good and inspiring talk on professional discrimination and facts downsizing women in research. My 9-year-old daughter is watching this talk with me, and she wants to know from you, Professor Shastri.
Oh, sorry, what does she want to know? Hi, Mamta.
Professional discrimination and facts downsizing women in research. Your brief comments, I believe. That's what she wants.
So she wants to know, are professional women downsized?
That's what she wrote. I don't know what she meant.
Yeah, I think yes, because I didn't get into the details of the mechanisms by which the discrimination occurs, but yeah, there are many dimensions. There are microaggressions, there is lack of acknowledgement, there is, as Neelam Kumar showed, even though no productivity deficit, there is still bias in terms of promotion, and so on. Yes, multiple dimensions along which things happen. And my cartoon, the cartoon that I showed in my last slide, I don't know if it's still visible, that also illustrates that phenomenon.
Another question. It's been, I think this is the most voted question by now, by Anna Arnadottir. You mentioned how underrepresented groups should be overrepresented as speakers. Are you not worried that this puts extra pressure on them, giving them less time for science and career development?
Yes, I agree with that fully. It is a problem. It can be a problem in institutions where there is a very, very small representation of the underrepresented groups. It's a balance, it's a battle, but the point I think now is that in a lot of instances, it is the opposite. It is that even though there are people available, competent people available from underrepresented groups, they are not chosen. So for example, the Resonance Science magazine that I gave the example of, when I guest edited the all women issue, I made a list of 20 potential authors whom I knew were competent. I needed 10. All the 10 said yes. So it was trivial. That part of it was trivial. And none of them had been asked before to write for the magazine. So you see, yeah, I agree. It can become a problem, but it's something that we have to balance. Yes.
Okay, so I'll take the last question from this session. This is the second most voted question, and I cannot take much more because our time is only 4 minutes left. There's a question by Helen Mason. Maybe Professor Shastri, you can answer to her in the question Q&A. So I'll take here the question by Cass Rawls. He said, "Thank you for your talk. We have a team of people at ICRAR watching you right now. What are some practical ways to increase retention of women or leading women?" About retention of women.
So I think that there are different factors which operate in different cultures and different type of institutions. By the way, I just want to say that following this, there will be a discussion which maybe Farsim can give the details of how you can log in or attend that discussion, but there will be roughly a half an hour discussion on the same on my topic, which I will moderate after this ends. Yeah, so to answer this question, for example, in India, one of the reasons why there is gender bias within the profession, one of the mechanisms is that there is a bias against hiring spouses. So if there is a scientist who is hired by an institution, the institution has a hidden norm. It's not a transparent norm. It's a hidden norm that they will not hire the spouse. And this discriminates against women preferentially because typically women are a couple of years junior to their spouses if their spouse is also a scientist. So this depends on, the very specific examples. On the other hand, for example, in India, if there is a more transparent mechanism to hire through an open advertisement and so forth, then those biases become less because the criteria have to be stated beforehand in a transparent fashion. So in terms of how to reduce attrition, I think it is important to do surveys within departments and sort of zero in on what are the causes for attrition, and then accordingly design the interventions.
I would like to add one comment by Pamela Gay, very important and pertinent, I thought. Pamela Gay says that it can be exhausting for the small number of women. It also puts us in more and more places where we experience issues. There is a cost to asking women who state to be role models. We do it, but there is a cost. So with that, and with your permission, Professor Shastri, we have only 1 minute left to this session. We conclude this session, and thank you very much.
Can you announce how people can
Sure,
get into the discussion?
yes, I will be. So the next session is about participant sessions and meetings that is also being moderated by Professor Prajval Shastri, and that will be available in the parallel sessions. So that will be another parallel session and starting in a minute from now. So you can join that session. So that's the end of today's session, plenary session 3B. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening.